Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast. I am Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host, a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, writer, and speaker. As a connection expert, I help people reveal their connectedness within relationships, transforming from the root causes of beliefs and behaviors that hold them back from thriving in life. Let's talk about how you're thriving. All right, I'm really excited today to welcome Dr. Trevor Boffone, Houston-based educator, writer, and content creator. I got to say, I found you on TikTok, so that alone is a fun intro to talk about how we're even connected here. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I got to start with that because I think that that's the way so many people do know of you, and I think that your story is so interesting. So I'll get back to some of the other things you've done, but I want to kind of kick it off with how did this happen, and tell us what you did on TikTok.
Oh boy, the TikTok question. I mean, TikTok came out in the US in August 2018, and I started teaching high school at Bel Air High School in Houston, Texas, around the same time. I didn't want to be there. I felt like it was me taking a step back career-wise. I taught high school right out of college, and so I was doing the same thing I had done, when I was 22.
Yes.
Wasn't thrilled. And also, there's a story about my dad there, but I think we'll hit that later on.
Okay.
And so my students were making TikToks, and me, being genuinely interested in what they were doing. I was interested in their culture, the way they were dressing, their slang. I wanted really very much to have a welcoming classroom. And so part of that was showing interest in what they were doing online or, during my class online, right? Because the cell phone issues are that's a different podcast.
Yes.
And they started making TikToks, and they invited me to make them with them. And so we started making them on their own accounts, and they kept going viral on Instagram, on Snapchat, all these different platforms that my young students were using. And then finally, they forced me. I would say they legitimately forced me to start my own accounts, and I did, and I went viral the first day. And we were making just fun classroom content where we were dancing together, and it was all student-led. So we're talking, the students would show up, they would say, hey, I have an idea. I would say, oh, hey, okay, great, let's do it after class, or if you finish your work early, or come during lunch, before school, whatever it might have been. And we just had fun. We started collaborating together. It was me. I guess I was 33, and I'm working alongside these 14, 15, 16-year-olds, really sort of flipping the classroom on its head. They were being the teachers. I was being the student. They were teaching me all about social media and teaching me how to really connect in a different way. And it ultimately changed my life and led me to being on this podcast, right? Because so many people started to be inspired by what was happening, really seeing, this intergenerational bonding, intergenerational joy happening. And also there's a racial element. I'm white. My students were mostly Black. And so, you see two people together that you typically do not see together, right? A 33-year-old white man with a 15-year-old Black girl, right? And so there's something there as well that just resonated with people. And it's an account, my account is all about joy. It's a positive place. I don't go in there and troll people. It's not a negative spot. It's very much a place to have fun, a place for me to just unwind and really bring the joy back to my life.
Well, and joy is exactly what I felt even watching it. I stumbled across it, honestly. And to see not only how happy you were doing it, but these kids, they were so moved and so impacted by it. And you could tell the bond that they had with you. And I just thought it was really amazing. And then as I kind of went down on the rabbit hole on you, I thought, wow, this guy is doing so many awesome things. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, you get it. You obviously get it. But some people, they just see the dancing and they think, oh, that's that, right? There's nothing to it. But
it's so much deeper than that.
Right. Because for a 15-year-old student to trust their adult teacher to go and do these things and not be forced to do it, right? It's all voluntary. No one is, I don't make anyone do it.
Right.
Some people joke that, they must be getting extra credit or that's how they pass the class. But that's really not what it was about. And it's never been about that. And so it's about just, being yourself, finding joy, and ultimately, being a positive force in the world in whatever way it is. And so there's a lot more, deeper things happening there.
Right. And I mean, the positivity is something that shines through on all of that. So much so that, I know you've been picked up by some different networks and shows to talk about this because I think it is such a big, almost a line crossing that I think kids keep that very firm line between their teachers. And to be able to see you do that, especially in these different type of kids and environments. And I don't know. I just don't think that a lot of people realized how impactful that is and how it shifts the way I think children think about learning and education.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had the sort of typical Dr. Boffone student, or like my most successful, students were ones that weren't doing well in school. They didn't care about school. They didn't see the value in school. They were maybe failing every class. I mean, legitimately, if you looked at their report card for the first cycle, failing every class. Then I get them in. They realize that to do the fun stuff in my class, you have to be passing. You have to do your work. It gets them a little motivated. And I would have students that literally would go from failing every class to all of a sudden doing work in every class, to passing every class. And it sort of creates this good vibe, and they want to be a part of the fun. For instance, we were on Good Morning America. We've been on Access Hollywood, Inside Edition, and all of those students, they knew like to do that, to have that opportunity to be talking to Mario Lopez, have your Saved by the Bell moment. You had to do the work in class, right? It's not just a blow off class. It's not just we're gonna make TikToks instead of doing our work,
right?
And that really sort of changed the equilibrium, the environment in my class, and people would start to do their stuff and really work harder, see the value. Also learned skills beyond just, I was teaching Spanish actually, so it had nothing to do with, anything in my content. And I'd have people say, why aren't you doing stuff in Spanish, or why aren't you having them do like salsa or Latin dances? And I'm like, well, it's their choice.
Right. But you would have lost them if you had directed that. It was directed by your students. It's kids who are able to say, this speaks to me and this is what I want to do. And so therefore now I'm going to do better to be able to be involved in this. Right.
And what happens in school, and this is across the board, private schools, public schools, is that adults are, I don't know if belittling is the word, but adults diminish they think that youth culture is less than, right? So the way they talk to students is very much like, oh, that's how y'all dress, or, oh, that's rap music. Like, no, we listen Tupac, that was real rap music. They make fun of the slang, and they might do it in a, haha, we're having fun in class way. But what that does is it teaches the student that this person does not think that their culture is of a certain level, right? At their same level. And so I always, when I work with teachers, when in my own classroom, I never, I might think in my head, like, really? That's what we're saying? That's the slang? But
you're meeting them where they are.
You meet them where,
and that's the big part of it. To meet somebody where they are, to be able to adopt language if you can, to be able to understand it, to not diminish it and not to belittle it, because we're talking about people's identities.
Exactly.
And that's so important, especially at that age. It's important your whole life. But at that age, these are formative times where people are trying to figure out who they are, who they want to be, and to feel accepted and to have a sense of acceptance in school, which can be really hard for some students.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what it is. And so they feel safe in my room, and then they'd want to do these things. And there's also, one thing I want to bring in is, you see me and, 1, 4, 2, 3, whatever students doing these videos, but there's students behind the camera, there's the hype crew, there's the students that just want to watch. And so it really is a lot more than what you see on camera.
It's inclusive. And that's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
And that's why people get so behind it, because they feel like they're a part of something, and they're a part of something fun and a part of something bigger. And there's so many messages that can be taken from that I think that what you're doing transcends other teachers maybe who are never going to dance and never going to be on TikTok, but can see, wow, look what an impact this makes if we can actually meet people where they are. We can get on somebody else's level, and we can befriend them in a very different way. And you cross those lines, those hard-coded lines that we're the students, you're the teacher. It becomes more of a oneness that I think, allows kids to feel safer, to be more adventurous in their own learning, in their own lives, and maybe thinking they can achieve more.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
I love that. And then that changed your life, because you came on this different trajectory. You're still teaching, right? You're University of Houston teaching women's gender and sexuality studies. But you're author of Renegades, the digital dance cultures from Dub Smash to TikTok and TikTok Broadway. I love that. That's awesome. And then social media manager at Fun Love Media. So tell me about kind of all that.
Yeah, so I do a couple of different things. I was teaching high school full-time, and I ultimately was burnt out. In January 2020 at Bel Air High School, a student was shot and died, and it sort of sent me down this very long burnout journey that from January 2020 to June 2023. I mean, legitimately, I was exhausted every day. I didn't know the only time I was not exhausted in that time period was when I got COVID, and I was stuck at home. And I realized after I got over the initial, really bad symptoms, I realized, oh, this is not okay. Like I should not feel as good as I do right now, with COVID.
Yeah,
right?
to be at home and to have moments to yourself and
Right. Just I was not stressed. The bags under my eyes started to disappear, And so ultimately I stopped teaching high school full time. I wanted to go part time, but that's another podcast as well, that I couldn't go part time. And so I'm teaching at the University of Houston. I also do work in social media management because I learned all of these skills for my students, and I started to, I manage my own channels, and so I work with other folks in Houston, mostly Houston, small companies, to really maximize their social media
Right.
presences.
Well, you have firsthand experience.
Yeah.
So how to make that happen.
Exactly. And I write. Yeah, I write. So basically, once all this virality happened, being a PhD and a nerd, I very much wanted to sort of research it and understand what was happening. And so I wrote these Renegades, which was about what my students and I were doing, about how youth dance culture on TikTok was sort of transforming broader culture in the U.S. And then came the theater book, the musical theater book, which was sort of my own musical theater fan journey.
I love that.
But I'm always writing something.
And so I hear you basically saying you kind of prospered. I mean, you blossomed,
Yeah.
being able to have this experience and then be able to kind of go out and do the very thing that you're coaching and teaching your kids to go do, to follow your own dreams, to achieve things. And you have a quote I want to mention about that was that what I learned that our dreams don't necessarily work out, but sometimes the dreams that come true are even better than the ones that don't.
Yeah, I said that? No.
Yeah. Yes, you did. You did say that.
I think it's on my website.
I think that's where it is.
But that's absolutely it. I mean, I went from when I was 10 years old, I wrote this. We had to do an end of the year project in 4th grade where it was like a book about me, and I had 5 things I wanted to do.
Okay.
And I've done all 5 things, by the way.
Way to go.
But one of them was get a PhD, be a college professor. And I didn't know what that meant when I was 10. Like, absolutely did not know. But I liked school. And so I ended up doing those things. And I finished my PhD in 2015. And I had immense troubles, which many people do, getting a tenure track job in academia. I mean, they do not exist, essentially. And I sort of felt like a failure. And that was something I'd worked towards from, I guess since I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I was 33, and then I went back to teaching high school. And so I sort of felt, again, I was not in it. Like mentally, that's not what I wanted to do. And then it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me, right? And so there was, fast forward a year later, like 2019 was the best year of my life. And maybe the best year of my life is still yet to come. But 2019, it felt like a movie. I was energized. I was excited about everything I was doing. I was getting these amazing opportunities. I was auditioning for like television shows, and the news were, I had the Harlem Globetrotters come to my classroom, and like rappers wanted to collaborate with my students and I, and just a lot of exciting things were happening. But it was sort of not where I thought I would end up, right? If I had sort of projected my life out when I was in 2015, it's just not what I thought I'd be doing. And I slowly started to realize that my goals had changed, and sort of what my dreams I thought I wanted to have in life had shifted into something wholly different.
But having that self-awareness to say, okay, wait a minute, now I'm going to take a new inventory of myself, my life, and see where I want to go, because basically your eyes were open to something very different.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just took sort of thinking outside the box and leaning into this new environment I was in to really see that, where I could possibly end up.
And that's the great message too, because we often talk about people that have later in life, moments to say, you know what, I'm not really doing what I want to be doing. And whether it's I need to go on a healing journey, whether it's I need to change my career path, whatever that may be, I think when people decide to become self-reflective, that's the game changer of all things. And I think we sometimes go through life without ever doing that until we have an impetus to do it. Until something happens, some sort of impact. And you had this amazing experience, but you also talked about grief healing and your own grief journey and what happened and how dancing and music was part of that, healing journey for you about grief. So what can you kind of tell me about that?
Yeah. So August 2018, I was set to start at Bel Air High School. I was, again, not excited about it. And on the first day of school, my dad died. Unexpected.
So sorry.
Thank you. He had a valve replacement, heart surgery, valve replacement, and it went fine in the morning. And then I guess 16 hours later, his heart rejected the replacement and he died. And so, I mean, very unexpected. He was 67. And so relatively young.
So hard.
Or young, yeah. And so, but just totally out of nowhere. And so I go from, this planning a funeral, all this stuff in New Orleans, and then I come back to Houston and start this job late. And I was not in it. I mean, I genuinely didn't want to be there. I felt like, again, a failure.
You're grieving.
I'm grieving, yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought what I needed was, I probably did need, it's just not to do anything, right? And especially not to meet new people. I remember there was a teacher who was wonderful, but basically I had informed the principal, but it wasn't sort of trickled down to people I would interact with. And so one of the people I met who I worked with said something like, "Finally, you got here." And I was like, "Well, my dad died." So then she felt awful. But that's sort of the headspace and where I was when I started to do this sort of TikTok journey. And so my students didn't know about this. I remember they were very shocked when they found out. But essentially, I really struggled with the sort of grief and my grief journey. And then it wasn't until we started doing this fun content, started dancing together and really sort of forgetting about everything else in the world and our lives, that I was able to start to sort of put the pieces back together and heal. And so I started that school year very much burnt out in every capacity. And I ended the school year on a high, energized, full of life, and really, which is the opposite of what 99% of teachers go through, right? The beginning of the school year, you're excited. The very end, no.
Right.
You are done. You're exhausted. Right. And so I ended that school year really excited about life, right? And I felt like I was given this, in a weird way, I was given this group of people to sort of help me heal, right? A very unexpected group. It's honestly, it's like a movie, right?
But it is because this foundation of these people who you least expected, that these students would be some people that, propelled you to look at life differently, really.
Yeah.
And to heal from a time of grief, to find joy in a time that you weren't feeling very joyous. It's really an amazing story.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, even 9 months, 10 months later, it still wasn't 100% healed from that grief journey. But after a few years of this, it's really, I think looking back, dancing was what did it. And I've always loved to dance. I always say I feel like I missed my calling. There's a different timeline where I'm a dancer, right? Like an actual, trained
a real dancer. Trained dancer on Broadway.
Exactly. And maybe knock on wood or whatever this table is made of, that could still happen.
Right,
there's wood, yeah. But I am a dancer. People know me as a dancer. It's a very strange thing, but dancing is what I've always loved, and it's what helped me sort of process the grief and move on, or not move on, but learn to live a new way, right?
But you were doing something that you loved. And I think that is such a missing link for so many people, that we go through life and kind of we do what it's expected of us. We do what the next step's supposed to be without much thought or recognition of what really makes me happy. Where do I find joy? Who am I really? And that, I think that soul searching is sometimes a piece that people miss. Go through your whole life, and then maybe way later, when it's almost too late, do you ever wonder, I should have done this, or what would have happened if? And for you to be sitting here to say you had this moment of really deep clarity and how it impacted you, I think that's such an amazing concept that I would love for a lot more people in life to grasp onto. I personally had changes in my life and my path later in life. And I always want other people to recognize that there's no idea that anything's too late. We can always choose something different. We can always define a new path, but it does have to come from a place of excitement with that joy. We're not going to be able to find it if you're burnout, depressed, sad, not moved. We have to be able to grasp onto something that's the lifeline, whether that's therapy, whether it's dancing, whether it's doing something that you're passionate about, Oh,
absolutely. It's a game changer.
Absolutely. And yeah. I love hearing that too. I want to talk about this kind of idea too, that as I was reading the comments on TikTok, all these comments about, what is this white guy doing in this space at all? And there was a lot of that in the beginning. And then you keep watching, and then people would jump to your, what are you talking about? Defense. And you were so loved in that space. But I think a lot of people in the beginning, what is happening when they first come on it? And
Oh, yeah.
what kind of feedback did you get like that? You know, how controversial was that when it first came out?
Yeah. So, if you look at my content now, I'm not in that space anymore. So
Right.
it's a bit different. But the first 5 years or so, it was a lot of content of me, again, white, 33 to 30, whatever, 38, I don't know, year old with teenage black teens. And so, and we were all over the news, we were on Black news, such as the Shade Room, which is like a very popular Black sort of.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if the listeners are familiar with the Shade Room. And I have one of my good friends, she said I'm the only white friend she has that's ever been on the Shade Room.
Yeah.
The one person she knows, and it was her white friend. But I think it is within reason and makes sense for people to be apprehensive of seeing, because there are, of course, white supremacy is a massive issue in this country and around the world, and it's, within reason to question the motives of a white person and to see this content and to at first be like, let's pump the brakes and really think about what's happening. Because at the same time, in 2019, when I really, really went viral, there were other teachers doing the same thing. There were Black teachers doing the same thing, and they weren't getting the same sort of
because it didn't cross those lines either.
Right. And so, but over time, once people got to know me, and I would try to talk about, anytime I did a TV thing, I mean, sometimes they didn't include, what I would say, but when I would talk about it, I would try to bring in the racial element and the power dynamic and talk about what was happening in the classroom beyond just the videos. And I think the more I talked about it and the more people saw how I interacted with people, I try to respond to every comment. Of course, sometimes I can't because there's too many. But I think the more people interacted with me and saw what I was doing, the more they got on board. And something I did in 2019, I did it pretty religiously for a few years, is I would get on Instagram Live every day. And I remember in 2019, I would get on and it would be like, I get home from school and I would do like a cooking show. And it wasn't actually a cooking show, but that's what it felt like. I'd be like, here, I'm making, baked potatoes. That's actually not that interesting. But I'd make something a little more interesting than baked potatoes. And I would answer questions, and I would answer anything.
Well, it's like the Get Ready With Me videos.
Exactly.
It's not about getting ready and putting on your makeup. It's about, I'm here, I'm captive, I'm here to answer you, to talk to you about everything.
Exactly. And so I would talk about all these things, and the kids, the young people would ask me these, about race and what was happening in the power dynamics, and I would be very transparent about it. And, anything that, I'm not trying to say I'm like this perfect person by any means either.
Well, none of us are.
But the more I talked about it, the more that people got on board, and then they would come to my defense, right? And I mean, there's still things that happen that I see where people don't know who I am, and they will comment things that clearly they don't know. They just don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And I don't fight with them, So yeah, it's been interesting because I do try, and in my book Renegades, I also go beyond. It's not just the TikTok or the Instagram. I do talks, I do workshops. I led for a long time at my high school. I led sort of an anti-racist teaching reading group where we would have conversations about this stuff and what we can do better. And my book, I write about it, right? So I've literally, and in my book, I center other teachers, other Black teachers who are doing the same work. I center, I myself is very much decentered in that book. And so I think people see these things and realize that it's coming from a genuine place and a place where I'm not trying to replicate the existing power structures in the country. I'm very much trying to redress it.
Well, you're breaking down. You're breaking it down. And here as a psychotherapist, and my listeners know, I also I'm the practice owner of Pinkerton Psychotherapy, and we see so many teens. We're right down the street from a high school, and we see so much of that. And there's so many teens that I think need that they're aching for that connection. And even though it's been a while since you were doing that in the classroom, to me, it's so still relevant right this second to talk about and to really explore how much that's needed and the ways that people like you are making a difference in being able to do that. Because there's no way that you did not impact everybody in that classroom in a way that they thought of themselves differently. It's not how they think about you. It's how that in turn makes them feel about themselves. And I think that's really huge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I still, I have 90 students right now. So I'm very much still around young people. And I mean, I see it with my college students. They're a little bit.
But is there dancing in college?
Yes and no. It's just so much harder. You've been there.
Sure.
Because you're there for a limited amount of time, and
Right.
it takes just a tremendous amount of effort to get a college student to do something with you. But I have students; they're very much interested. We do make like educational, TikToks in class
Okay.
as like class projects, and that they really enjoy. But I do things like I bring food every class, some sort of snack. Usually, like HEB always has like weird chips, like the seasonal weird chips.
Okay.
So I'll bring stuff like that that is a conversation starter. And so, the first day of class, they walk in, and I also wear like a hat or glasses every class,
Okay.
just like something weird to break down the.
It's the icebreaker.
the
It's the way to
icebreaker.
connect differently.
But I'll offer them the chips. Then we talk about the chips, and then we're talking about life.
And I didn't even know HEB had some weird chips. I might have to explore that
Oh,
here
yeah.
for our practice.
So the ones I bought yesterday were loaded nachos.
Okay.
Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad.
Yeah, okay.
But everyone tries them, or a lot of people try them, and they want to talk about the food. Then we talk about their major, what classes you're taking, and they feel more comfortable in that space. And so I had a student last week that was like, "Oh, it's my birthday next week. Are you gonna bring a cake?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll bring a cake." Mostly because I want to eat some cake too.
Sure.
But I try to bring the same sort of energy
Right.
to college, and I think a lot of my students are shocked by it because
Well, they're not used to it, especially at the college level.
They're not. Yeah.
But I think what is the buy-in you have from those students? I bet you they don't miss your class. I bet
Oh, no.
that they are literally
Yeah.
present and in attendance because they don't want to miss it. They want, what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And it's that sense of curiosity that you're also creating in people.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing that gets me too is they will say like, "Oh, you're the only professor I have that knows my name." I'm like, how is that possible? I mean, I know some classes have like hundreds of people, but it's just mind blowing to me, because I don't feel like I'm doing anything that revolutionary.
But it is because it's
Right.
connection. I mean, and we talk about connection so much on this podcast because I think that is just the missing link of what all of us want to connect. We're born to love and be loved. I mean, that is a human condition, is right, to want to connect with other people. And it's so hard to do that in an educational environment because of those lines, because of those power dynamics, because of, the separation that exists. And for you to be able to change that and shift that, and not only in high school, but then in the college level too. That's pretty amazing. I have kids in college. I would love for them to have professors such as you to do that. I want to talk about your academic journey because I thought that was interesting, what all you've done and how you were teaching Spanish and then Latin and now women's studies. Kind of give us the inside scoop on this journey and how you made these decisions about what your focus is.
Yeah. So you sound like my dad right now, actually. He would
do.
say, like, every time I talk to you, you have a new focus or a new area. And
I love it.
that's a compliment. No.
Good. Tell me.
Why?
Why? What is the why behind all this?
It's all about community. So everything I've ever done, it's all about how communities are formed. So when I was, doing my PhD in Spanish, I was actually doing it in Latino theater performance and theater broadly. And it was all about, my dissertation was on a theater in Los Angeles, East Los Angeles, and I wrote about it as a community center. So I
Okay.
went and I worked with the playwrights and the actors and very much looked at how this theater space was changing the face of a community in so many different ways, empowering people, giving people a platform to express themselves, develop agency, change their lives. And that's sort of the through line of everything. If you read my books, if you read all the stuff I've written a lot of stuff, it's all about how people come together. And what I'm doing in my classroom is not that different, right? And I remember after that shooting in January 2020, my classroom became the hub at the high school.
Really?
Which was part of the burnout, right? Just the amount of emotional labor I took on.
Yeah.
And so that happened on I think it was a Tuesday. On the Wednesday, we had just the teachers went for like an hour, which was brutal. And then Thursday, the students came back, and I got someone, my mom, thanks, Mom, to donate donuts. So I had 12 dozen donuts, which I thought was a lot. That's like over 100 donuts. And I just put on Instagram. And then I had a friend from Carnegie Vanguard High School, another high school in Houston, let me backtrack. So the students were circulating on Instagram, wear a black ribbon
Okay.
in honor of this student, wear a black ribbon. And my first thought was, well, who's organizing this? Like, where are the students getting the ribbons, the pins? And so I went and my friend said, I'll make the ribbons. My students will make the ribbons. So I went and got the ribbons, 2,000 safety pins, and his students made 2,000 of these ribbons. Now
I love this story.
We have 3,200 students, okay? But that's all I could muster up. And so I put on Instagram, and again, I only taught, 5 classes. I taught 150 students or so at a 3,200 a school with 3,200 students.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on Instagram, and when I turned the corner that morning, like an hour before school, I had like 50 kids outside my door.
Wow.
Which it was a dead hallway, and it was literally like 50 kids. And that morning, I ran out of the ribbons within like before school started. I had already went through. I set my room up. Like there was the juice, the donuts. I had art supplies if they wanted to make posters to memorialize the student. And every single person at school came through my room. And it was just the most remarkable thing because I was just doing what I've always done, which was create a space, give people a way to express themselves, feed people. And then looking back, the 12 donuts was cute. It was a cute idea. They went very fast.
I bet they did.
And I should say also, I for years I called Donuts with Dr. Boffone, and it was like the first Friday of every month I would have donuts before school, and students who I didn't even teach would come and have a donut. But teachers kept coming up to me that morning, and they said, "How did you know to do this? Like, why did you do this? Like, how did you know?" And I'm like, it's community. We need a space.
And it's compassion.
Compassion, community.
And sometimes the compassion piece is missing because of high burnout rate.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to be compassionate if you're burnout.
Yeah.
That's a diametrically opposed concepts if you really think about that.
Oh yeah. Well, and when you go towards the end of that sort of high school journey for me, like yes, because I lost my patience with
How
a
did
lot
the
of
school
stuff.
feel about everything that you were doing?
Very positive, very supportive. What I was doing, of course, would not have flown at every school, but they very much appreciated. I mean, it was all good stuff happening. I mean, we were getting there was a tremendous student buy-in. Also, I had I won't say every student. Let's say like 90% of students, 95% of students at that school knew me, right? And so I could go into. Like if someone they were having issues, there was a fight club or whatever it might have been, I could go and like talk to the kids and they would listen to me. Like no one wanted to be.
Well, you had their ear. You were on their level because you had met them where they are. It's back to that same concept that I think is missing so much.
Yeah. But basically, I could sort of get them to do anything. I mean, good things, everyone. Good things.
Sure, of course. Without a doubt. It goes without saying.
And so the school really appreciated that, right? And there was also a lot of good press. You have a public high school in Houston, Texas, and we were on Good Morning America and all these national shows. The news was all the time, and it was a positive human interest story about the school. And so they very much liked that. And the district, HISD very much loved me. And they would like have me come like do different like MC things, and they liked it.
That's fun.
Good press.
And then the shift to college is so very different.
Oh yeah. So the college is interesting. I will get recognized on campus. I see a lot of because again, the bulk of my audience, it's a little different now, but the bulk of my audience is still young people. I mean, there might not be 15 anymore, but they're now like in college or they're in their 20s, and so they will see me and they're like, "Oh my God, you work here?" And I have several students I have 4 this semester that took my class because they saw me on TikTok.
Wow, that's
Which
amazing.
I'm like, this is wild.
That's so fun, though.
I know. I'm like, thank you.
You're absolutely going to be working hard in there for sure.
Yeah, and one of my students went to the high school I worked at, and I didn't know her, but she was like, "I saw you on the the class schedule," and I was like, "I have to take a class with Dr. Boffone." I was like, "What?"
And that must feel so good for you. That's a lot of recognition of that you are making a difference.
Yeah, I feel like Brene Brown. No.
Okay, so looking back on all this and all this journey where you've gone, what do you think the biggest single, impact was for you? I mean, what do you think, if you were to really summarize that, what did you get out of all this?
What did I get out of it? I think I got comfort in my own skin. I think for so long when I taught, when I was online, when I was in front of people, I felt like I had to police who I was and really be a watered down version. And when you do any sort of teacher training, they always tell you like, don't smile till November, those sorts of things. I mean, it's
that's wild to me.
because they're like, if you show any sort of, if you smile, if you have fun.
Is it weakness?
You lose the student's respect.
So
and
they
it becomes
smell
harder.
They smell it. They smell the fear. They smell
Right,
the
exactly.
sense of,
But that's what you're trained to, I mean, literally, I had people, other teachers tell me this when I started, and I had taught high school before. And so that's sort of the vibe you go in with, even if you want to have fun. And what I really realized is that I could be myself. And when I was being my most authentic self, the way I speak, the way I dress. Well, my style of dress did not change much, everyone, if I'm being very honest. I'm kind of a boring dresser, although I did get a compliment today on my socks. Thank you. But dancing and being myself. I remember I had a moment in spring 2019 when I realized I was in the hallway. My students were working in the hallway because I had more students than I had desks in that one classroom.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We could talk about public education in
okay.
another episode.
For sure.
I have a lot of other episodes for you, apparently.
You do. I mean, just serve them up.
But I remember I was like just dancing and like singing and talking, and there were students everywhere. And I realized I was like, I could do anything I want. Like I can be any form of myself right now, and no one's going to think less of me. They might like me more, right? And I have that. I have teachers who message me. I have students. They send me DMs, young people, whoever it might be, and they talk about how my content helps them to be themselves. Like it doesn't teach them, but it gives them a roadmap of what it might look like.
Well, it's permission to be authentic.
Exactly.
It's like if you can do that and you can show that it's safe to be who you are, and people either accept you or they won't, and that's okay.
Exactly. And so that's been the sort of big takeaway from this journey. There's been a lot of positives. There have been some negatives. But
such is life.
Exactly. But again, it's sort of enabled me to be. Now, I still, if you watch my content, you will not see my legs from the knee down. You will not see from the knee down. And what's interesting is, I don't know if this is.
So we're not all going to get to see the socks.
I might do a sock tour, like a sock video one day. I don't know why. I think I have nice legs, actually, everyone. But that's a different kind of Instagram account.
This is a very different kind. It does exist.
But yeah. I just so I don't show my legs, but I very much am myself. I'm who I want to be, and I am proud of that. Because I also, I did social media my whole life. I mean, once it came out, I was on MySpace, and I was a blogger and like all that sort of stuff. But I very much was apprehensive to. So if you look at my I have a personal Instagram I have like 400 followers, and you will not see my face.
Really?
I don't post on it much anymore, but before all of this, I posted like 5 times a week or so, and I never once posted my face. It'd be like, look, here's my drink.
So interesting.
Here's my coffee. Here's a mountain.
And then look at you now.
And now I'm like, and then it took me years to actually speak on social media. I was afraid. I wasn't happy with my voice.
There was this progression
of
how you felt about who you are.
And I will tell you, I was, because I didn't like the way I sounded on camera. I didn't like my voice, my mannerisms, whatever it might have been. And I remember I had a friend, Brittany Crossan, shout out, who said, hey, you wrote this book, Renegades, and you talk about this young girl who created this dance. You need to make content where you educate about that to sort of promote what she has done. Like another step forward in like redressing the shitty, can I say that?
Right, yes, you can.
Racial relations in the U.S. And so I very much mustered up the confidence, and I made this series where I sort of educated about the work that she had done. And then I realized, people aren't making fun of me. They're not, everyone's supportive. And
you were being accepted.
I was being accepted. And so I do my thing now.
Well, congratulations on doing your thing.
Thank you.
Because I think that's what it's all about. We all have that quest and that search for authenticity. And to see that you're not only doing it, but doing it really well, have made such an impact on people and continue to do so. I can't wait to kind of see what you're going to do next. So
me too.
You'll have to stay in touch with us. We always have a guest question. I have to find it in here that someone left before you. And sometimes it's related, sometimes it's not. So I'm going to serve that up for you, and then give you a chance to give us one back. The guest question was, what was your darkest hour that in hindsight turned out to be your biggest goal?
Well, I think it actually goes back to what I've talked about here. I mean, when my dad died, side note, I ate 12 donuts. I ate a full dozen donuts.
Okay.
About an hour later, which impressed with myself. But that was my darkest hour.
Is that a record?
For me, it's a
For
record.
you?
For me, it's a
It
record.
would definitely be a record for
And
me.
these weren't Krispy Kremes. These were like full on like donuts.
Okay.
So donuts are my danger food. But my darkest hour was that moment. Like I literally, I've never, my mom's still alive. She's very healthy. But I imagine if you have a sick parent, they have cancer, you sort of prepare yourself. It still hurts. It's still hard.
Right.
But you prepare yourself. And in this scenario, it was very much out of nowhere. And so
You didn't have that chance to get ready.
Exactly.
You didn't have the moment to be able to reflect on it, to think about what it would feel like.
Exactly.
It was just a complete surprise.
And, I have a pretty graphic memory, but when I tell you I could like second by second do a hour-long replay of like that moment when the doctor told us until we like left the hospital. And we actually, I'm going to make this even worse than it was. We put our dog down that day.
Oh, Trevor. Brutal.
My like childhood dog, who was a 19-year-old Chihuahua, who was his time it was coming, and I remember we were going to tell my mom like we need to like you can't we and then my dad dies and she brings it up. Let's put him down and then they can bury him together. And so it was just, I remember
so sad, but so sweet also.
We took the dog and my sister and I are just like bawling, crying, but it couldn't have gotten worse. And so that was this lowest moment. But I found the gold through my students. I hate to bring back the same story.
No, but I think that is so relatable to understand that was really what did it for you.
Yeah. And I think, again, leaning into something you love. And so I have people that ask me, I don't dance. What do I do? I'm like, well, what do you love? Do you like to draw? Do you like to paint? Do you like to do yoga? Like, do those things, right? Do something that is for you that, if you're a writer, write.
Right, but you're also describing what we would term as self-care.
Yeah.
And it's missing for so many people because then we live a life where we don't have any passion. We're not passionate about anything. There's nothing that brings us joy, and life becomes monotonous, and then what is the purpose and what is the point?
Absolutely. And so, it's hard to say what my journey would look like if my dad was still alive. If all the social media stuff I don't know what would have happened, but a lot of the positives in my life are because I leaned into this particular way of grief or processing grief, and this way of trusting the people around me that wanted to love me and show me their culture and show me a way to move on.
Well, don't ever deviate from that path because it's beautiful, for sure.
Thank you.
What question would you like to leave for our future guest?
Okay, I feel like mine's a little less heavy.
That's okay.
But
it can be as simple as you want it to be.
If you were a flavor of ice cream, what would you be and why?
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I like ice cream.
What would I even say on that? All right. Well, we will let you know and circle back with you on that.
Please
It's been
do.
really a pleasure meeting you and talking with you today. And you're really amazing. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on you and see what's coming next.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Trevor.